Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our April 21st, 2022 board meeting. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nations communities across our vast regional district, and today we are located on the Secwepemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with the Secwepemc and respect the territory and land on which we gather today. The Thompson-Nicola Regional Library is delighted to announce its guitar lending initiative in partnership with Riversong Guitars of Kamloops. 20 guitars are now available at library locations across the TNRD, and that's with online content to support guitar learning. More details about this innovative lending project can be found in your folders or via the library's website at tnrl.ca. And I had the privilege this morning of being there for the public announcement of this wonderful project. And it was really gratifying, and it was so pleasing to see how Ms. Moore has been able to think outside the box and breathe new life into the library. And I'm sure that it will afford the opportunity for many people who could not otherwise afford to have a guitar to pick one up and try it and see how it goes for them. So I think it's a wonderful initiative, and I was really happy and proud to be part of that this morning. Effective the June 14th board meeting, we will resume full in-person attendance for all board members at committee and board meetings, subject to any changes, of course, in provincial health orders or guidance. And while we do have currently a resolution in place with respect to mandatory vaccination requirements of board members for in-person attendance, this matter will be discussed as an additional late item on the agenda today. As per the board procedure bylaw, a board member may still participate electronically, but only if exceptional circumstances prevent that board member from attending in person or sending in an alternate, and they must have the permission of the chair. We would also like to welcome Director Dennis Walsh, who has been newly appointed to our TNRD board, replacing former Director Kathy Sinclair. We look forward to working with Director Walsh for the remainder of this term. There are upcoming meetings and events. On the 5th of May, we have the next regular board meeting. On May 18th, we have a policy review committee meeting. The Thompson-Nicola Invasive Plant Management Committee meets on May the 18th as well. On the 19th, there is the Emergency Protective Services Committee. On the 19th, again, there's a regular board meeting. And on May the 20th, we will be calling for an additional committee of the whole meeting. In your blue let's try that again. In your blue folders today, you will find a message from Member of Parliament Frank Caputo, member for Kamloops, Kamloops Thompson Caribou, regarding nominations for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee pins. And if you know of someone who would qualify for such an honor, by all means, take advantage of that nomination form. Information leaflet is there about the TNRD Guitar Lending Initiative. So today we have a couple of public hearings. The first dealing with zoning amendment bylaw number 2770-2022, 4006 Shuswap Road, Lions Head. Today's public hearing is convened under the provisions of the British Columbia Local Government Act to hear submissions relative to the proposed bylaws 2770 and bylaw 2773. This is the public's opportunity to make representations to the board. All persons present who believe that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaws shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaws. I would ask those members of the public who wish to speak to please commence your address to this board by clearly stating your name. The board will not debate the matters of a proposed bylaw with individual citizens, but board members may ask you questions following your presentation. This public hearing is to listen to your views. Thus, no one will be discouraged or prevented from making their views heard. Zoning amendment bylaw number 2770 would amend bylaw 2400 on a site-specific basis by permitting a meatery on a 2.3 acre parcel along South Thompson River, east of Kamloops, in the CR1 country residential zone. Madam Corporate Officer, are there any written submissions?
Yes, Chair, there was one written submission submitted just expressing concerns, and that piece of correspondence is in your agendas.
Thank you. Is there anyone present wishing to speak to this proposed zoning bylaw amendment? Please come forward to the podium.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Zordell. I live 3 houses down from the proposed meatery. First of all, I have a question regarding the meatery, and then I have 2 concerns based upon what I think the response will be. My question is this: you're asking for a change in the bylaws in a residential country area. How is this different, the proposed meatery, from someone who's already out there brewing beer within their home or having making wine within their home? How is the meatery different that they need to have a change in the bylaw?
Ms. Zadokova, would you like to respond to that, please?
Sure, this is a little unusual. Usually questions are asked before the hearing and
sorry.
staff don't talk. It is different in that a license is required from the liquor and cannabis regulatory branch, and in that it will be for sale to the general public. Whereas if you brew something in your basement and you consume it, if you're selling it to the public, that is illegal.
All right.
So in that way, it's different.
Thank you. Then my concerns are this. Number one, again, it's a country residential area. If he's selling or she is selling this on their property, that's going to be an increase in the traffic along that area road. That is a concern because we don't know what that will entail in terms of the increase in traffic. You're allowing them not to have a gift store or a shop, but you're allowing them to sell it, which means they will be advertising and people will be out there checking this out and purchasing their product. That's a concern. The second concern is there a smell associated with this? Down by the bridge, there is a large marijuana product being grown. And we know that towards the end of the summer and into the fall, before it's actually, before they actually cultivate it, there's quite a strong smell in that area. I'm concerned about a strong smell in this area as well. So do you know anything about that?
I certainly have no knowledge as to whether or not a meatery would emit odors. I have no information on that. Ms. Zadokova, do you have any, has anyone made a suggestion to you that there would be odors associated with this operation?
No, I am not an expert in mead. We do have the applicants here. Perhaps they can answer. I can clarify one point, especially as regards the cannabis. This land is not ALR land, and there's a big difference in the package of rights that comes with ALR land. Cannabis without any kind of a rezoning or other process can be grown on ALR land with a license from the federal government, I believe. And same with wine. Wine is an agriculture product. It can be grown and produced in ALR without any special permits to go on further items like having a lounge and sales that often will come to us. But just the production and the growth is permitted on ALR. In this case, it's adjacent to ALR, but it is not ALR on this land.
So we don't know if there's a smell associated. I tried to find information about it online, but I couldn't find a lot about meateries and what they entail. So we don't know.
I'm not an expert
in the production of it, eh? So we don't know about that. Oh, okay, okay. Then furthermore, then the question regarding the increase in traffic. Is that going to be monitored at all? Is that,
I can only assure you that our planning department would have considered any ramifications, including traffic, that the operation would have. And what road are we speaking of, by the way? Is this Shuswap Road?
yeah, I'm on River Vista Road. We're three lots down from where this proposal is taking place. So in the same general area with the same traffic area.
I know that any implications for traffic would have been taken into account by planning.
So we're saying that there won't necessarily be an increase in traffic,
No, I don't think anybody's saying there won't necessarily be an increase in traffic, but I think that
but we don't know how much.
planning would have ascertained that there would be that any increase in traffic, I'm assuming, Ms. Adilkova, you can maybe speak to this, but I would assume that they have decided that it wouldn't result in such a significant increase in traffic that it would be problematic for anybody. Is that correct, Ms. Adilkova?
Yes, it is correct. And we work with the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure, and they did examine the application and they did not have any concerns. All they wanted was an access permit, and they did review the full application.
Thank you.
All right, that's all I wanted. Thank you.
Does anyone, before you go, does anyone have questions for our presenter? Director Rothenberger.
No, actually, I should probably ask staff this later. It is in regards to traffic, but they'll ask it in this context or wait till we get to staff later. Yes.
That's right. I think that would probably be appropriate to take it up with staff. Yeah. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for your presentation, and your concerns will be considered by the board.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak to zoning bylaw 2770?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'm Bernita Weinhold Leahy. This is my future husband, Leroy, and he's going to read out a statement.
Okay, so part of the summary that I'm going to read to you is to briefly describe the operation in very bare bones manner, but also our general philosophy. I just want to let people know that mead is an alcoholic beverage made from honey, water, and yeast in its most basic form. It could also be made with fruit, making it similar to a fruit wine, except made with honey instead of sugar. I've been keeping bees for about 10 years, and I'm an avid homemade mead maker, and the proposed meatery allows me to combine both my interests. Our meatery will be a small-scale artisan operation that will be running out of an existing 3-bay garage. The most comparable facility that we know of would be Sagewood Winery, which processes its grapes in a 2-bay garage. In terms of marketing, the minimal yearly production is about 4,500 liters, about 6,000 bottles. If we sold every day of the year, we would have to sell about 18 bottles per day. We plan to go to the farmers markets, which requires us to have an on-site store license as well. While we actually would not prefer to have one, we are told by those who know better that it's unrealistic not to have a tasting room. However, we will explore other marketing strategies that would minimize its use. So we are not interested in maximizing our hours or anything like that. That's not in our interest whatsoever. And of course, a tasting room would require us to maintain the property to a high standard and be good neighbors. Over time, we will introduce new plantings to enhance it's really a beautiful property and improve the sight lines of neighbors as needed. This year, we are trying to establish native willows and cottonwoods along the riverbank and have ordered 10 trees for the rest of the property. Last year, besides planting fruit trees, we established some service berries and Saskatoons. We wish to enhance landscape diversity and wildlife values on the property as well. This of course will be an ongoing process and it's long term. As far as the honey produced, most of the honey will be produced at other locations around Kamloops. The purpose of this site is to produce queens and starter colonies that support the operation. Maybe 5 or 10 of my best hives will be used as queen mothers, and then small starter colonies that don't have a lot of bees in them will be established and then placed on other sites to mature. Overall, there should be less bees on this site than a fully stocked production site. I try to keep my bees as natural as possible with a minimum of feeding. So making proper stock density decisions is important for all my sites. Selecting and propagating local bee stock is very important for local sustainability for bees. And that's what I'm trying to be a part of that solution. As a side note, I'm very interested in pest and disease resistance in bees, and I'm actively selecting for this trait. My bees are part of a longitudinal study that looks at their genetic trajectory in reaction to environmental and pest and disease stressors. This is important work that will contribute to honeybee sustainability. And it's not directly related to the meatery, but it just sort of tells you where we are coming from in terms of our philosophy. And so that's basically the statement that I wanted to make.
And we just want to reiterate that we require a tasting room or an on-site store for the liquor distribution branch to be able to sell at farmers market. So that's one of their requirements. And we've been told by other people that, you know, a tasting room is kind of a must if you want to have a small boutique winery or meatery. However, we do want to minimize the amount of traffic to the meatery, and we ourselves are going to be running it, and we are not going to be able to man a tasting room 24/7 or as long as we, you know, so we're going to have very minimal hours, and we hope that it doesn't exceed the amount of traffic because yeah, we want to be friendly with our neighbors, and we want to make sure that we don't impact our neighborhood overly much.
Thank you. There may be other questions. The one I would like you to answer, is there any odor emissions
Oh, yeah.
anticipated?
Odor.
No, it would be about the same as any boutique winery, I imagine. Like there's a bit of fermentation that happens, but it's not such a huge scale that I don't imagine that having a huge impact on the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Does any other board member have a question? Director Rothenberger.
Thanks, Chair. I can ask the question now that I was going to ask, because they mentioned Sagewood Winery just not far away, which is a boutique winery. It's in the middle of a residential neighborhood. They have a small tasting room. It's have you done any comparisons on what the traffic impact might be? Because it might be a good example, or any other neighborhood impact.
We haven't done that. We have been told that there haven't been a lot of complaints about traffic, except for the really big wineries, which,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I just thought in scale that one might be comparable. My other question was, there was a mention in the letter that we received about a CCAN. Can you enlighten us as to what the plans are for that?
Well, we want to paint it so it looks the same as everything else. And then we sort of see where the windows are of neighbors. And so we want to establish some vegetation to provide some screens as well.
So it would be screened.
It will be screened, yeah, but it takes a while for a tree to grow. And so we'll start off with painting it and then we'll move forward from there. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Director Stamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question in regards to the liquor licensing with LCRB. If it says here that public consultation is not required for a manufacturing license if you're going to be using a tasting room, is there any future plans? I know you're mentioning that you wouldn't be there 24/7 to be able to have supervision or be able to run the operation, but is there any further plans down the road to possibly use an outdoor area? Possibly like from a 10 to 2 kind of thing where you have that opportunity to maybe grow your business a little bit? Is that any further? I know it's
We have
another consultation process, but is there any further thoughts in your mind about that?
We are not overly interested in that.
We were thinking maybe having a couple of picnic tables, just like the Sagewood does. They have a couple of picnic tables around, but nothing that we would serve anything outside.
No, we're not interested in serving.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does any other director have a question for these folks? I don't see any. Thank you very much for your presentation. Your information will be considered. So that takes us to, oh, pardon me, are there any further representations with respect to this matter? bylaw 2770. And for the third and final time, are there any further representations? Seeing none, that will move us to zoning amendment bylaw number 2773. It also amends zoning bylaw 2400, also on a site-specific basis at the Wells Gray Ranch, to enable a full-service guest ranch and campground on a 133-acre RL1 rural agricultural parcel, to increase the number of allowable sleeping units and to acknowledge historic uses of the property. Is there anyone wishing to speak to zoning amendment bylaw 2773? For the second time, is there anyone wishing to speak to bylaw 2773? And finally, for the third time, is anyone wishing to speak to bylaw 2773? Seeing none, Madam Corporate Officer, are there any written submissions?
No, there are not.
Are there any live video submissions or other speakers?
I don't believe so. Dave, is there anyone that's indicating they wish to speak on Zoom? Nope.
Thank you. There being no speakers, I will not call 3 times for further representations in the sense that there haven't been any at all. So we will move from there to. Are there any additions or deletions to or from the agenda? Seeing.
Yes, there is one.
Yes, I don't know how she wants to deal with that. Madam Corporate Secretary, what do you want to do with the, I know where in the agenda you wish to deal with it. Is that in addition to the agenda, the vaccine policy question?
That's correct, Chair, and we'll deal with that after Mr. Hildebrand CEO verbal report.
Thank you. Excuse me. Okay, that takes us to the minutes. We have draft minutes of the regular board meeting, March 24th, 2022.
So moved. Second.
Are there any, is there any discussion? I'm seeing none. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. That takes the bylaws from public hearings. First, the Cherry Creek Savanaw Official Community Plan Bylaw 2762 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2763, 2022 for 6497 Savanaw Access Road. I understand Vice Chair Roden will speak to this.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. Very briefly, I'm sure you all have seen the reports and correspondence about the public hearing in this matter and the agenda. There was a public hearing in Savanaw on March 30th. Directors O'Reilly, Elliott, and myself were there. At the public hearing, there was some discussion about matters such as traffic flow and speed on Bowie Street, water concerns, flooding concerns, etc., but nothing to do with these are not matters that have anything to do with the zoning question in front of us. The opinion of almost everyone there, if not everyone, was that the rezoning of this property would be desirable going to residential to preclude it from being used for something like a campground, a park, a zoo, all of which are uses that are currently permitted under the zoning that is there now.
Thanks, Director Roden. There are Director Elliott.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to move the recommendation number 1.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
And number 2.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Opposed, if any? No one's opposed. Carried.
Move number 3. Second.
Is there any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
And
And-
move number 4.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of recommendation number 4? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. That takes us to zoning amendment bylaw 2770, 2022, 4006 Shuswap Road, Lions Head. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Any discussion? No discussion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. That takes us to zoning amendment bylaw 2773 for the Clearwater Valley Road.
Move recommendation 1.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried.
Move recommendation 2.
Is there any discussion? None, all in favor? Is anyone opposed? No one's opposed, that's carried. Okay, that takes us to delegations and invited presentations. We have a presentation from the British Columbia Wildfire Service. Caitlin Baskerville, I think, will be conducting that or carrying it. Are you on our screen here, Caitlin?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon.
And do you want to go forward with your presentation?
Absolutely. So good afternoon. I am Caitlin Baskerville, the Kamloops Fire Center Manager. I'm joined by Rob Schweitzer, who's the Provincial Director of Fire Center Operations. We are joining you today from the traditional lands of the Secwepemc people, where we both have the pleasure to live, work, and play. I want to thank the board for inviting us back to meet with you all once again. Since our last engagement in October, where we met on the back of BC and particularly the TNRD having a significant climate change event in the way of a record-setting fire season, I think we were all turned around not too long after to collectively respond to the atmospheric river events that yet again paralyzed some of our communities and displaced thousands of people and disrupted major transportation lines, not only locally, but nationally as well. Given the natural disasters that we continually to personally live through and professionally address, it is timely that we reconvene in anticipation of the 2022 freshet and wildfire season. I want to thank the board for the questions that were provided ahead of time to help focus our discussion today. We have prepared a bit of a presentation that will hopefully address the majority of the questions posed and provide some insight into the continuous work and evolution of our program to not necessarily prevent or stop the effects of climate change, but to mitigate, prepare, respond, and recover from these events. So bear with me, I'll just pull up our presentation. We're not accustomed to using Zoom, so oh, here we go. So we were hoping to utilize the next 30 minutes or so to present to the board the following key items. For the purpose of time management and getting through these key items that were brought forth by the board, I ask that you please hold your questions until after the presentation, where we will have time to answer any unanswered questions. So the intent today is I plan to go through a quick overview and quick facts about the program just to get us all on point, and then go over the 4 items that you see there in terms of funding changes and future state for our program, as well as some of the concerns that were brought forth of the board about staffing, recruitment, retention, the use of local resources and partners, and some finance questions as well. So to get us started, some quick facts for context. BC's forests and wildlands cover up to 94 million hectares provincially. As many, if not all of you know, BC Wildfire is not solely a response organization, but our mandate is to deliver effective wildfire management and emergency response to support, including mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery, and that being across all hazards as well. There are on average 1,500 wildfires each year across the province. I think it's important to note that approximately 60% of those are caused by natural causes or lightning, and 40% are human caused. Now, between 2017, 2018, and 2021, I think it's safe to say that this average I have up here on the slide is trending upwards. On average, the BC Wildfire Service is successful at containing 94% of all unwanted wildfires in BC by 10 a.m. the following day. Of course, those fires never really make the headlines, but that's all right, because it's the large, prolonged, and destructive fires that we will continue to see in British Columbia and globally for that matter, according to a report released a few months ago by the United Nations, which clearly stated that we are in a global wildfire crisis and that we have a heightened elevated level of risk in all regions, including even the Arctic. Research in that report indicated that extreme fire events will increase by 14% in 2030, 30% in 2050, and by 50% by the turn of the century. The report calls for a shift in action in the way of funding allocations, away from a reaction and response method and more proactive efforts in prevention. It also highlights the importance of incorporating Indigenous knowledge and strong regional and international cooperation. Quick snapshot over the last 5 years we have up here. You'll see that 2021 did not burn as many hectares as 2017 and 2018. However, the fire season was arguably more severe with how many fires that there were total and how many were located in what we call the urban interface, whereby we're directly seeing fires that directly threaten property and life. Scott shared a timeline with us that TNRD recently created that shows the number of evac alerts and orders that the region had over time. And I think that that timeline is indicative of that wildfire urban interface threat that we see more and more of. Some aggravating factors that I shared with the board last October is, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic limited our ability to import out of province firefighting resources more than we've seen before. There was also, of course, the historic heat dome in late June and early July that brought those record-breaking temperatures well above seasonal averages and accelerated the drying and curing of our fuels, kicking off our fire season much sooner than anticipated. And the high number of active wildfires were not only here in British Columbia, they were throughout Canada and also the Northwest Compact into the States, which led to multiple agencies competing for firefighting resources and equipment, which I know that you're all very much aware of. So despite these facts, quick facts that I've shared with the board, we are optimistic. Government is making an avid effort through these events to invest in us as an organization and in our partners to be able to more effectively respond. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rob Schweitzer, the Provincial Director of Fire Center Operations.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Before I begin, though, I'd like to recognize all the individuals who reside within the TNRD and who over the past 12 months have had to live through that wildfire season, or an atmospheric river, or in some cases both. And I know that the TNRD staff and the elected officials have worked tirelessly in really trying to assist in the recovery efforts. And the staff within my program area, the BC Wildfire Service, are really grateful of the show of support that we've seen from individuals that have been impacted on the efforts that our staff have made in the response and the recovery phase. So I have the opportunity to speak to you about a number of things, probably more the future looking changes and the real funding announcements that were made here in February. And despite the fact that climate change will continue to become a very real and lived reality for British Columbia here and the rest of the world, the support we've received from the provincial government has been significant. I've been with the provincial government for over 30 years, and I've never seen an investment like the one I've experienced in this program alone over the last, since 2017, but specifically since last February. And in that budget that was tabled in February, it contained $2 billion in climate resilient funding for this fiscal year alone. And it really provided some exciting changes in the terms of how we approach forest fires, with one of the largest investments in the history of our program to really transform our program to a year-round organization and grow our capacity both internally and externally with our partner agencies. So as you can see on the slide, we received an increase in our baseline funding and what we call our fire management vote or account from 136 million to 194 million. Often there's a misconception though that we can only spend to a certain amount. And so we're capped at a certain amount. And we're one of the few jurisdictions in the world that have the flexibility to spend what we need to spend to suppress wildfire. And so we take that opportunity very seriously, given that it's taxpayers' dollars, but there is no hindrance in our ability to spend funds on what our tactical and operational senior staff feel that's needed to protect life, property, and BSEM values. We also received a recurring increase to our prevention envelope of $20 million a year to continue to allocate towards risk reduction projects, primarily on Crown land. So I think the board and others are quite aware of the amount of investments we've received and are been issuing around the prevention file since 2017 and some of the recommendations that came out of the Abbott-Chapman report. So we also received some one-time fundings, an investment of $90 million to be delivered through the Union of BC Municipalities for community funding and supports like FireSmart. And it's important to note, this is an application or proposal-based funding envelope that is available to regional districts, municipalities, First Nations, and local governments. And given where the TNRD is located in the province, there's a real predisposition to wildfire. And so applying for this funding to affect the mitigation preparedness work required is paramount to protecting communities. And there are over 40 eligible activities under this funding envelope. Things like education, community planning, interagency cooperation, emergency planning, FireSmart projects, and for critical infrastructure and residential areas. Fuel management projects, as well as funding for training. So it's quite extensive, and all local communities should continue to maximize the program, what the program has to offer. And I would really encourage the TNRD and the local governments in the Okanagan to really take a hard look at this funding and work with us and our partner ministry, our partners in the ministry to seek where these opportunities could be. We also received $8.7 million in capital funding, and that's really around our facilities and our camp infrastructures and specialized equipment. And then $4 million in training for training certification and real partnership in the Indigenous communities, capacity and engagement. And we'll talk a little bit more about those later on in the presentation. And again, I just want to reiterate, these investments really demonstrate that support government is providing to the BC Wildfire Service. And it's critical to our needs in delivering all 4 phases of wildfire management. So the future of the BC Wildfire Service, I just got a couple slides that I'll touch on here, and we'll go to slide 8, Caitlin. And really an expanded prevention, wildfire risk reduction, and prescribed fire. So again, we'll get a bit more into the details, but these are all areas that we have been working on for many years. Funding certainly increased provincially coming out of 2017. And then we see that renewed commitment from government in the funding model, as I just described. Prescribed fire remains a challenge. It is a tool in our toolkit to help with fuel mitigation and the protection of communities and critical infrastructure. But I think as people on this call today know, there are challenges with the condition of the forest to actually reintroduce fire to those landscapes, as well as smoke management concerns and health concerns of the general public. The second one I've touched on a bit, but building capacity both with First Nations, small and rural isolated communities. Caitlin will speak about something called a community firefighter model project that we started over the winter, and that we really want to start pushing out even further and trying to develop what that could look like. We did things like partner with the BC Cattlemen's Association last summer to enter into agreements where we could use locals' equipment, mostly in the agricultural industry, to assist us when possible or when we didn't have resources readily to deploy. And then we've always been a year-round organization. We've always, well, over the last 5 or 6 years, we've expanded our response capabilities into some of the other natural hazard events that have occurred in this province. The Fraser River landslide with the salmon. But probably we're more formally stepping into this space, and we certainly saw it in the atmospheric river, where we actually deployed our subject matter experts in incident management to assist local communities, both on the incident management side, the EOC side, but then also on the labor side and the aviation expertise as well. So some of the future state pieces that we are very focused on as an organization. You know, as these fire seasons continue to extend, they're getting longer. They're not just a couple months in the summer now, as everyone has unfortunately experienced that lives in this part of the province. We've had to adjust and extend our resources across the entire organization. And we're not only backcountry now, we are a front country organization. We are up against communities and homes, and we are really working in and around those communities. And that has to be a shift for our organization. We were not built to be a front country organization originally, and we've really tried to adapt some of our strategies, tactics, and partnerships to increase our training and our equipment and how we partner with the Fire Commissioner's Office and local communities around doing structural protection in and around those interface areas. We are experiencing fire behavior and force conditions that even the most seasoned industry and BCWS staff have never experienced. We had, I believe, over 600 or 550 forest industry people working for us last summer. I have a tie-in with a working group that I chair with the industry, the forest industry, and I heard many stories from them that they saw fire conditions that they never have seen before in their life, and frankly scared them. Our staff are experiencing the same thing, and I think everyone, it goes without saying, is our first focus and priority is always responder safety and life safety of the public. And so seeing those conditions are really challenging us. It's not unlike what other jurisdictions are seeing around the world, like California and Australia. We have to evolve and train our staff to work on those flood, landslide, atmospheric river events. And we're at full capacity during the summer months. We have about 2,000 staff available to us internally to us. And as we start to ramp up during the season, we have a great network through our own ministry and government to bring on even more ministry and government people locally within this province to help assist through what we call a Teams program. And so through this investment that government's made, we're really trying to expect to achieve these results that you see on the slide, and we're being tasked with this. This is what our mandate is now coming out of this budget, is that year-round organization that leverages those preparedness activities and prevention activities with local communities, and really using that, that local Indigenous capacity where and knowledge where it's available. We need to be prepared and assist in provincial response, enhancing those tools and technologies to help our internal decisions and external understanding of the public and the conditions that we're facing. And it's really key as we build out some of these systems internal to us, and we learn from the Californias and Australias on what they're experiencing and how we can adapt that technology here in BC. The final slide I'm going to cover is, how we do our work is really changing. And it also comes with a culture shift with our organization. And we're not perfect. We were an organization, I would argue pre-2017 specific, where we were very successful in going about it alone. We learned a lot out of 2017. That was backed up by the Abbott-Chapman report, where it said you need to do more with local communities. And we're still shifting that culture. And yes, we do hear some of the challenges that occurred last summer in certain pockets or certain areas of the province. But overall, there's a lot of good news stories and a lot of stories where people felt engaged and integrated into our work, way more than we've ever done. But we need to continue to focus on this area. And we need to expand our prevention and wildfire risk programs and our culture and prescribed fire, and flush out those 7 disciplines of fire smart that I talked about in an earlier slide. and really just be prepared for the citizens of BC and what government's expecting us to be available for that year-round, those year-round response activities and be able to backfill and surge capacity over the long term. Caitlin, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Rob. So the investment made by government into our program will be used to build our capacity in the way of staffing, recruitment, and retention. As an awareness piece, this is a snapshot of our resourcing last summer. On the right is more granular numbers that demonstrate the operational resources and people that we had working the fires. It's important to note that when you look at this slide, all resources are provincial. And although 400 of the 1,900 or so internal staff reside within the Kamloops Fire Centre, we allocate resources provincially to priority areas to address the greatest operational need. At the peak of the 2021 wildfire season, there were nearly 4,000 people involved in wildfire response, and 80% of those resources and staffing numbers were actually operating in the Kamloops Fire Centre and largely serving the communities of the TNRD. You'll see on there some figures on helicopters. I just want to point out that those are our long-term contracts that we're reporting. However, I did pull the numbers and we had 284 helicopters hired across all types last fire season, and collectively they flew close to 40,000 hours, and that is the most helicopter hours we have ever seen in our program. We essentially hired every available helicopter in Western Canada to affect our operations. Not depicted on this slide are the hundreds of personnel that deployed to BC from other provinces and countries to assist, as well as the invaluable support from the Canadian Armed Forces that provided aerial assets and Army personnel for firefighting. There was interest from the board as to whether or not we would have more localized incident commanders in 2022. Being a response agency, we have resource coordination capability to move resources from any location to assist on the incident based on priorities. In the TNRD boundaries specifically, we have hundreds of trained and certified resources available to respond to fires ranging from type 5, which is your kind of low complexity campfire, to type 1, which is your large scale complex campaign fires, such as the White Rock Lake fire. So within the TNRD, between the Kamloops Fire Zone, Merritt Fire Zone, and Lytton Fire Attack Base, there are upwards of 150 personnel available to respond, and most of which are certified as incident commanders across these types. We have to ensure when an incident commander is deployed to an incident that they are trained appropriately to safely lead and conduct fire response operations. As Rob said, the fire behavior that we're seeing is unlike we've ever seen before, and so this is becoming an even more of a priority. It is a responsibility that we do not take lightly. Wildland firefighting is one of the most dangerous, hazardous activities that requires a high level of oversight and understanding of the fire environment. For this reason, we are very careful with who we choose to deploy into these type 1 incident commander roles. We will continue to manage wildfires through our resource coordination structure, which involves zones, fire center, and provincial resources, as well as the international resources. Before I flip to the other slide, I did put a picture on here of our people. Although it just looks like a sea of red, and oftentimes last summer they were just referred to as red shirts, they're an incredibly resilient and dedicated group of people who put service before self for the people of British Columbia, and I'm incredibly proud of their effort last season and the seasons prior. In line with the budget announcement, we are conducting a multi-phased, pragmatic approach to increase staff across all areas of the province and the fire center. As part of phase 1 for the 2022 fire season, we have evaluated crew configuration and implemented a new model to be phased in across the province, whereby we are moving from 3-pack to 4-pack initial attack crews and from 20-pack to 22-pack unit crews. For the Kamloops Fire Center, this first phase will be applied for 2022 in the Kamloops and Vernon Fire Zone. The first phase equates to 100 additional firefighter staff provincially, and the crew configuration will continue to be applied in a phased approach across all fire zones over the next 1 to 3 years, eventually equating to roughly an additional 250 or so crew members provincially once the project is complete. The intent of this crew modernization project is to create greater capacity and operational leadership roles within the crews and to staff the crews in such a way that affords interoperability to create flexible capacity options in how we deploy crews. Essentially, with a 4-pack IA crew now, we will be able to easily configure them into 5 packs of 4 to create a unit crew if we have a large sustained action campaign fire like we saw last season, And conversely, we can deconstruct that unit crew and create 5 IA crews if the priority is to remain ready for new starts. This will assist with retention and career pathing as well, as our staff will have more exposure to different types of fire behavior and more opportunities to fulfill leadership roles. The crew modernization project will be ongoing over the next 3 years, as I said, with continuous evaluation and refinement as we go. It also includes a holistic view at our crews, including fatigue management, our work to rest ratios, equipment upgrades, training, and of course, facilities to hold them. Some of our challenges with retention and recruitment will also be addressed with this crew modernization project, as it affords more of a career path choice for our crew members, and it supports them in a way that fosters professionalism, retention, and a culture of high performance. As we grow the crew ranks, though, we must grow the support functions that directly support and enable them. We must also grow the program areas that are responsible for the other pillars of emergency management, such as preparedness, mitigation, and recovery. And equally as important, we must grow our capacity to engage with partners more closely in forums such as this and the TNRD After Action Review that we participated in a few weeks ago. So the funding that we've received will also grow the necessary support program and engagement functions through a holistic organizational design project. That work has already begun. We have recently increased our wildfire prevention staffing numbers, our full-time dispatch staff, as well as our asset management coordination positions across the province, which right now equates to a recent uplift of 9 new positions regionally here in the center in Kamloops. We must be deliberate with how we approach the growth of our organization. Growth has to be approached at the appropriate speed so that we don't dilute the talent and experience we have within the BC Wildfire Service. Another question was brought up about recruitment and retention, and it continues to be a focus of ours. The issue of recruitment is not just a BC wildfire issue. I think we're seeing it in all fields. I do believe that COVID has played a large role in our ability to recruit, as there was not a lot of places hiring for the last 2 years. And now that we are seeing the economy open up and the measures loosen up, we're seeing that more jobs are available to our staff who went to university and to school in specific fields. This season, I will note that we have invited 400 people to new recruit boot camp, and approximately 320 have accepted and are going through boot camp over the next month. And this will help fulfill our numbers and our positions that we've created for the 2022 season. For some context, previously we would put through about 210 recruits through an average training year. People continue to be our strategic strength. You know, I think as we all know, the work that we offer is extremely physically and mentally demanding. And so we continue to explore and invest in the mental health, resiliency, and physical well-being of our staff. Fatigue management is a key priority for our organization, and we are constantly reassessing our work to rest ratios to figure out how we can structure ourselves to maximize efficiencies and protect the mental and physical well-being of our people. And seeing how it was asked by a board member as part of the questions, there was a question of how are we continuing to create an inclusive workplace for our own staff? And I'm very proud to say that this organization takes all issues of harassment and bullying quite seriously, and not only for our own staff, but for our multi-worker work sites as well, that our staff find themselves working in quite regularly. So I'm not sure what board member the question came from, but I would be keen to hear more about your inquiry into our respectful workplace, bullying and harassment policies, standards of conduct, as it is something that we take seriously, that we train and educate all of our staff on, and that we immediately address in action when it is raised to management. We've also invested in providing an alternative, anonymous way of reporting harassment and bullying through our safe reporting line. So yes, please follow up with me following this meeting, and I'm curious to dig into your question a little bit further. Lastly, as Rob stated, $4 million in training afforded to us on a one-time basis. This will allow us to continue to develop our wildfire leadership and operational training. And we are increasingly partnering with educational and training centers of excellence within our advanced education ministry, and also with our partnering wildfire agencies to make sure that we deliver training that is not for the current realities, but for the future. Here we have just a quick snapshot of local resources and partners, both internally to government on the left, and then externally to government on the right. As we continue to deal with extreme climate change events, these partners on the board as we all know, need to continue to work together as one team to achieve the effect of mitigating loss for British Columbians. For context, last season, there were over 1,400 personnel contracted to provide various fire-related functions, including fire suppression, structural protection, tree falling, first aid, catering, and security for our camps. There was another 650 personnel from the forest industry that were engaged this fire season, and they were invaluable to the fight, and the majority were deployed to our region and most likely to the TNRD as well. For example, the White Rock Lake Fire, the incident management team actually leveraged the Wildfire Act once they arrived on scene to hire 40 or so community members who had the equipment and the training to integrate into the operation. A few questions were asked by the board of the use of fire brigades and partnering with them in response, as we do with local fire departments. So I created a bit of a slide here just to delineate the two and explain the differences. First, it's not accurate to suggest that fire brigades do the exact same job as municipal and regional district fire departments. There are some key differences. Fire brigades do not have jurisdictional authority. They have members and property owners of their society that sign on and volunteer with the brigade to enter onto private property to suppress a fire within their capabilities, which is mostly exterior attack of structure from a distance and small grass and brush fires. This is different than a tax-based municipal regional fire district department that has jurisdictional authority within a delineated fire protection area, where they can provide the range of services they offer to all taxpayers within that area. The range of services can include exterior and interior structural attack, road rescue, first responder, hazmat, as well as initial attack on wildfires that we do leverage our interagency agreement to be able to utilize those resources. The way that we solicit the support of fire brigades and fire departments does differ, and I have that up on the screen. We have an interagency agreement that exists with fire departments that allows us to call upon them and to work together. For the fire brigades, we can sign up their equipment through equipment rental agreements. That requires an inspection on behalf of our staff at BC Wildfire here at the center to inspect the equipment and the apparatus to make sure it's in good working order before we do sign it up. And then the mechanism to engage the actual staff of the fire brigade is through statutory hire personnel under the Wildfire Act, which we are accustomed to. But for safety reasons, personnel have to be trained to be able to safely perform the job and have to prove that they have that training. I will admit that as we continue to evolve our program, our use of fire brigades has not been as frequent as we have largely been able to rely on local fire departments and those existing agreements. That being said, we fully acknowledge the growing area of response, especially into rural communities, and recognize the need to proactively employ a fire brigade services so long as the appropriate training and equipment can be proven. So as for the training, I did provide a link here, and I did share this with Kevin Skrepnik, who can share it out to the board. There is a list of endorsed companies that provide the training we require. There's roughly over 250 providers on that link that we have reviewed and that we support the training and that it is equivalent to what we provide. And as per the funding that Rob spoke about with UBCM, you can actually fund that training through that funding pot as well. So second last slide, I promise, just local resources. We are actively, as we do every season as part of our preparedness strategy, we proactively—
Excuse me, Ms. Baskerville.
Yes.
These presentations are normally restricted to 10 minutes. We're now well over double the allotted time. I have a whole series of directors who wish to ask questions. Are you near the end of this presentation?
Yeah, we are. I was actually given 30 minutes by Scott, but I can cut it off there and we can turn to questions if that's what the board desires.
Okay, I would ask you to conclude it as quickly as possible because I do have a whole series of people who wish to ask you questions.
Good. Okay. Well, so yeah, we do rely on local resources, whether it's equipment like you see on the board, the hiring of local community members. Rob spoke about the community firefighting model that we're continuing to evolve to determine more structure in terms of how we can actually utilize local community members as first responders, especially to call in the fire and take initial action before BC Wildfire comes on the scene and takes command. Last season, we had lots of success with First Nation community liaison officers that we deployed and embedded within our incident management teams to act as advisors, especially as it pertains to archaeological sites and to be part of some of our planning. We've done quite a bit of work with BC Cattlemen, not only during fire season, but also more recently with workshops that were held in the TNRD on the 7th of April in Kamloops and on the 12th of April in Ashcroft, where we spent an entire day with the membership of the BC Cattlemen's organization to talk about pre-season preparedness, to work through them and sign up their equipment and provide training as well to them. We've also provided them with a list of online training that they can take on their own volition. And of course, industry has been invaluable. We saw lots of success with that last season. More locally on the Momich fire, we had Interfor up there operating autonomously, but yet quite integrated into our operations and working with the zone quite closely. And this is the last slide. There was a question about equipment rates. So just for some awareness, we went away from the Blue Book rates 3 years ago, and we've adopted timber tracks. And on an annual basis, we do reevaluate these rates based on feedback from contractors. And these rates are automatically adjusted based on fuel rates on a monthly basis. So we are accounting for that hike in fuel that we've seen and that we're collectively living. Last season, this fire center processed 250 million invoices. Now I understand that we're not always able to get them paid within that 30-day timeframe based on receipt. We are working at that and we are getting better at it. I would argue since 2017, we've made huge headway in staffing our finance section to be able to make payments in a timely manner. And sometimes delays are due to errors on invoices that we have to kind of communicate back and forth with the company to fix and then be able to make that payment. So I'll pause there and I'll turn it over to questions from the board for either Rob or myself.
Thank you. I have directors Stamer, Quinn, Roden, Watson, and Rice at the moment, and Singh. So Director Stamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank to staff, wildfire staff, for putting the presentation together. I'm sure that took quite a while to put some of these facts and figures together, and appreciate the work that you've done. Unfortunately, there was a bunch of questions that we asked. I thought that those questions were fairly simplified so that they could be answered in a simplified manner, and unfortunately, they haven't been answered. I don't really want to get into it right now with all the questions that weren't. I mean, there were some significant questions in regards to the review on what went right and what went wrong last year. Obviously, BC Wildfire Service doesn't want to share that information with us, otherwise they would have. The second part that I want to touch in about that is just on the last point that Ms. Baskerville mentioned about the payment. It's significant when we're asking for local operations, contractors, hotel, motel, food services people to provide services basically on goodwill, when all we talk about is payment within a deadline, and not specifically looking at the root of some of these issues, including the fact that there are a lot of people that had to wait 3 and 4 months with significant debt that they had to be paid, some in 6 months. We suggested a simplified process, particularly with people that are already identified in the system, you know, possibly having a 50% within 30 days, particularly with heavy equipment, fuel, wages, small motel, hotel, that sort of thing. And all we get is that we're increasing our staff and we're working on it. I find that unacceptable, and I think that we deserve a better answer than that. But thank you very much for offering what your superiors are allowing you to say. And I'm hoping that we have an opportunity to be able to talk frankly with the higher aboves so that we are prepared for the next season. And I'll cut it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stamer. So as part of we are an organization that continuously reviews what we do, both on a micro and a macro basis. So whether it's about a certain tactic taken on a fire, we always evaluate before we take that tactic, what objective we're trying to achieve. We then take that action and immediately review it for its effectiveness. And that's just ingrained in our culture and the way that we operate, both operationally and then also systematically in terms of an organization. That rallying up, coming together and conducting the after action reviews that we do is something that we take extremely seriously, and that drives the evolution that I spoke about, or that we both spoke about in this presentation. So I am being, it's not about my higher ups. I think I'm being as transparent and honest as is possible in terms of what we've learned and how we're evolving. For the contractors, I'd be curious just to have some examples so that I can look at those more closely and see what went wrong. So if you're willing to share those with me, that would be great.
Thank you, Director Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. I have 3 short questions. Are improvement districts eligible for the various kinds of fire mitigation services that you're looking to fund?
Improvement districts?
Yes, we have some of those.
What I'll do is is there a chat here? Or I'll send it to Kevin. I will send the link to the UBCM. It's quite explanatory in terms of who is eligible, how to apply, what those eligible activities are. And I think it's a great question that you're asking. I don't have the answer necessarily, but I'll share that out, and in there you'll find information. I'll also share our prevention contact information so that as you navigate that site and that program, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us and we can help guide you in the right direction.
Thank you. The second question is boundaries. About half of my area lies in the Prince George region. The other half lies in the Kamloops region. Who do those folks talk to? And one of the communities has no high-speed internet connection. Just who would they talk to? If you could provide that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so the province is divvied up into 6 fire center regions. And so I can absolutely, put the individual that you're speaking about in contact with my peer in the Prince George Fire Center. We do cooperate and collaborate. I meet with my peer group and the other fire center managers on a weekly, if not daily basis, to navigate both throughout fire season and this time of preparedness as well. So if there is a communication gap there, happy to bridge that gap for you if you provide me the contact details.
Thank you. My final question is, I'm somewhat skeptical on all the investments that you're making, particularly when you close the air tanker base in Blue River with no notice to anybody. You did that. It doesn't need to be answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Roden.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. So thank you for that presentation, which was certainly full of a lot of numbers. And I was reminded of Shakespeare, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. I'm going to throw a couple of numbers your way. K21849, otherwise known as the Tremont Creek wildfire. On July 12th, it was 5 hectares. By the time it ended at the end of August, it was 63,548 hectares. You say you're successful at containing 94% of all wildfires in BC by 10 a.m. the following day. That was one where you were definitely not successful. I have heard a lot coming out about that fire, and it is certainly not an indication of building capacity and engagement, including First Nations, small, rural, and isolated communities. So I guess the question is, if we learned and improved so much after the Abbott-Chapman report, the Philman report, 2017, 2018, why did we see so many issues in 2021, and why are we getting so few answers as to how these issues are going to be addressed going forward?
Yeah, so the Tremont fire, you're right. It's one of the 6% that got away from us. And I think given the conditions that we saw, that's to be, I hate to say it, but to be expected despite the destructiveness that it had on communities. Our incident management teams on day 1, their first task as the incident commander is to hold a stakeholder meeting and to bring in key leadership and community members. Now they can't bring in everyone, and we definitely rely on what we call a single point of contact concept to have effective communication during times of crisis. But we do tie in immediately with the community, First Nation community, municipality, again, a single person that can speak for them and that can be that conduit of information to make sure that our operations are considerate of regional nuances. I don't know if you have anything else to add there, Rob, in terms of the Abbott-Chapman report and how we've evolved in that, but
Well, and I think the only thing I would add is, you know, is we as an organization are looking to regional districts and local governments to help us help those local communities. And so we are more than willing to step into more sessions like this with staff or local communities to help bridge where we've seen problems in the past. If there's a perceived or real communication issue there, then we need to know those details so that we can then engage in those communities at the local level with our local staff to make sure that when the next incident occurs, we do better. Because that is what we do as an organization. We are always trying to do better, faced with very uncertain and different types of conditions that this province has never experienced. So we're more than willing, if those examples, those exact examples are brought forward, we will follow up with them. Thank you.
Director Watson.
Thank you. My questions were pretty much asked by Director Quinn, except for exchanging the Prince George Fire Region for the Caribou Fire Region. So I'll await your answer to him.
Thank you, Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I got a little more up close and personal view of the whole incident because I was there at the wildfires. It was flaming across the river from me. And first of all, I want to say to the ground crews and the suppression crews and the fire protection crews, wow, what an incredible job. They were there. If I would have lost power, they were there with a backup gasoline pump because they were running short of things. So the crews on the ground, but when you have a toolbox that's only half full, that creates a huge issue. They were peeling off personnel as the fires were. Tremont Creek fire came up, we lost a few people. So another fire came up, we lost a few people. While our fire is growing, you just can't have a half full toolbox during emergencies. And there's an urgency attached to an emergency like this. And when Rob said reactive and proactive and stuff, that's a big issue, not only with fire emergencies and firefighting, healthcare, whatever, agricultural land stuff. We have emergencies going on right now with the flooding, and government has a great way of saying precedent and liability, and that's just political speak for no. And until we get proactive and get in front of this stuff and have things in place to have an urgency and an implementation in place, precedent will always be a government argument that gets to no. Liability will get to no and stuff like that. We got to get past that. We had people running tractors for 30 years that were building fire breaks, and they're told to get off their tractors. We got to get to a point where they can call the incident commander the point man. That was one of my questions that didn't get answered. We have a point man there that calls incident commander and say, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. I got to get down to the next hot spot. And I got to put that out. Jim here, he can build a fire. I told him to move it 20 feet to the south, build his fire break, and I'm going down the road, come back and check on him later. On Highway 8 alone, there is, I'd say, at least 20 gasoline water pumps. I mean, when you use your power, that's pretty valuable information. We should have an inventory of those phone numbers and those people, and whether it's we have water trucks, we have fire pumps, we have compressors, we have all these local resources, and we have a half full empty toolbox that we can fill up. And we don't seem to want to go outside that liability precedent box. So we just give that answer. I had Ministers Farnsworth and Fleming on my farm looking at what has happened to him. I've been out of my house for 5 months and 5 days, and I'm the first one to get back home on Highway 8. And I have those ministers telling me, you know, we'll do something. That was a couple of weeks ago and stuff like that. And then I go to check off the boxes for disaster relief. I get no money. There's no money for me because I didn't lose the ground I grow in. I didn't lose any infrastructure. So it just goes to show you, I'm glad you're trying to get to proactive. So precedent can't be an argument, because right now it is. And it's not just for emergencies. It's an argument for anything that comes up, and it gets to no real fast without actually saying no. But as far as what happened on the ground, it was amazing. So I applaud those folks out there every day that I go out to my farm. I'm actually allowed to my farm with an escort now. So been watching these guys for 2 weeks going 90 miles an hour to rebuild the river and move it so they can put the road where the river flooded to. That's what's going on now. Guess how far they are from Spence's Ridge? Our farm's 5 kilometers outside of town, 5. So they got a long ways to go. So it's just, we need to expand our thinking. I will ask, I'll stop right now. As you can see, it's been a long 5 months and 5 days with our 5 farm dogs and my wife, her brother, and my farm partner in a little place that we're living because we've been out of our home. But all my questions, I asked 6 questions. So I'm going to ask staff to forward them on to you guys. And then if you could answer them in more detail, I would appreciate that because I don't want to take up any more of your time or the board's time. But please pass on my thanks to those frontline people because they did do a hell of a job and stuff like that. But we need to start expanding our toolbox. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And I will pass on your thanks. In times of crisis, we've learned that we can't do this alone. And so you're right, that proactive approach of signing up equipment is exactly where we need to be. And so all those individuals you spoke of, I'm going to send you the zone contact who is actively right now signing up equipment for this coming fire season. And so we are not turning anyone away. It's just about making that linkage into the zone. Those individuals that do own equipment, and it's not just heavy equipment, anything that they have, they can contact the zone, have that equipment signed up so that in a time of need, it's easily called upon and can be paid for as well. But yeah, please follow up with your specific questions and we'll get back to you.
Thank you, Director Singh.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. I just first of all want to thank you all for being here today and thank the Wildfire Service for the amount of work that's going on. I want to say hello to my friend Rob because we haven't seen Rob for a while. It's seen him on airplanes and hotels a couple of years back, and now we're here at this meeting. I just wanted to sort of focus in on this notion that this is such a unprecedented thing in terms of like the change in the climate and the change in the weather behavior, and that, you know, we're all very anxious, obviously having been through an urban and rural all over the region for the last 3-4 years. It's been very challenging. Around this time of year, we all get worried about what the summer is going to look like pretty quick here. And, you know, it causes a lot of anxiety, as you can see. And I know that there's a lot of work being done, you know, with the Wildfire Service, and I'm hopeful lessons have been learned, and I think they have been learned. But just the unprecedented nature of what's kind of happening. And so I guess part of what I'm thinking is that there's no point blaming each other, right? We have to work in partnership on all these kinds of things. And we have to figure out where we actually can work. And I think the local knowledge we have around this board table is such a value to you folks as your knowledge is to us about how we can actually work together, because, you know, you have Director Rice, who knows, you know, intimately his area. Dr. Stamer has intimately his area, has already a history of wildfire for many, many years. You know, there's a lot of people here who have a lot of knowledge. Sometimes, and one of the signature recommendations of Abbott Chapman was, you know, we have to kind of meld that expert knowledge with the on the ground knowledge, right? So I guess, number one, how do you feel that's going? And number two, is there a possibility that we can do like some almost some tabletop exercises with elected folks sometimes? Because sometimes elected folks sometimes don't always understand how we situate ourselves in emergencies in that way, especially those who aren't mayors yet. You know, there's a conversation about that I'm quite interested in too, because I find that there's a lot of role confusion sometimes as to what we actually do and don't do. So number one, how can we actually change knowledge in the best ways possible, you know, throughout the wildfire season, but also in preparing for that, you know, how can we actually work to sort of test out or sort of test things before we're in the middle of, like, you know, what we were last year. Thanks.
For the tabletop exercise, oh, go ahead, Rob.
No, you go ahead, Caitlin. So you're going to use the tabletop exercise. Go ahead.
Yeah, tabletop exercise, I think, is where we're evolving to be. Because we have to work together, we have to exercise together, and to be able to figure out what our capacities are, what our resources are, what our skill sets are to bring to that table. Maybe I'll hand it over to Andrew as the coordination manager for the region to talk about any kind of potential initiatives that are being created for coordinating tabletop exercises across all hazards.
Thanks, Caitlin. Good afternoon to all the board members. Andrew Morrison, Senior Regional Manager with Emergency Management BC. We do tabletop exercises. We also support with elected officials training. That will typically happen following the election, I believe, scheduled for the fall. But we could happy to do something in sort of a one-off environment if the board wishes. Just would ask that we work through Scott and Jamie and Kevin, and we can make something like that happen.
Thank you. Director Brown.
Just a bit of a follow-up on one of the questions on payments that was addressed by Director Steamer. In the city of Merritt, we only had one restaurant that was willing to work with ESS during the fire season last year. The reason for that was the previous year, our restaurants did not get paid for a long time. And one of them was telling me that the second reason was that the payment was that they thought they were going to get was reduced by $30,000 for things that they knew nothing about beforehand when they took the role on. So one restaurant only this year came in on the fire season. I guess that would have been 21. And by mid-December, they had not been paid for their fire services. They were in the middle of trying to now take on more debt for the flood. By mid-January, and I had already called the minister by that time, and he had told me previously, I'm right on it, I'll get the payment to him. By mid-January, he was still not paid, and I don't know what's happened since then. I haven't gone back to him. I'm assuming he hasn't complained, so he must have gotten payment. But that was asking for a brand new restaurant to take on all this debt and then turn around and take it on again. And just saying, I agree, just saying that the payment system will be better doesn't help our locals when they are taking on this debt and going into debt themselves to be able to do it. To me, that is, and that's just restaurants. We have contractors saying the same things, and people are saying they're just not willing to do this anymore. So I worry next season when we have fires or floods or heaven forbid, any other kind of disaster, we're not going to have that support in the communities to be able to help us through. And I really urge you, please fix up your accounting system.
So Andrew, Director Brown, did you say ESS support? That's what you were referencing, that restaurant?
The whole payments on, yes. Well, it's the vouchers that they get for, whether it's for ESS or whether it's for bringing our personnel, our, what do you call them, essential personnel in the area. Whatever and whoever had the ability to give these vouchers, they're a disaster, and people aren't willing to look at them anymore.
Director Brown, it's Andrew, the NBC. That process is in the midst of changing. We recognize there were a number of challenges given the scope and scale of last year. We did things quickly as we could. Happy to report, to the best of my knowledge, all of those invoices were paid for those restaurants in Merritt. But going forward, we will be revamping our emergency support services payment system as of about June this year to a more funds type of a model that will allow payment to be made on the spot and not wait months for payments to be made.
And also, if there are things that are not covered, that restaurants or whoever else understand what the rules are, so they're not, in their minds, penalized for helping out.
Yes, that'll be part of the education of the new model.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question for any of our presenters here? Director Polderman.
Thank you for your presentation. I've been talking to some of our local leaders, and we realize that fire coverage is a high priority now, but we're looking at cost and we're looking at training. And the training issue, I believe the fire service could go a long way in helping to resolve. And I'm wondering if that's in your plans.
Yeah, thank you for the question. we need to focus on continuing to develop our skills, and that is our primary focus. And a close second is training our partners. And there is funding available for that through UBCM. I will send the link. It's quite an easy application process, actually, to be able to get the funding required for your municipality or your area to be able to affect some of that training.
Thank you, Director Rain.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up on Director Brown's comments on EMBC. We had a situation where North Okanagan Indian Band was evacuated to Sun Peaks. No people came, no voucher system, totally left in the dark. Busloads of people sitting around. Many didn't have cash, many didn't have credit cards, no ability to feed them. We actually implemented a voucher system ourselves with the assistance of one of the band members, distributed that, but we had the same horror story in the end. Payments 6-8 months later weren't made. I think they have been resolved now. I hope. I haven't heard any complaints in the last couple of months, but it just has to be better. And I'm glad to hear that you are going to make some improvements.
Yeah, Mayor Rain, there was a number of challenges last summer. Thank you for your support in that process and looking after some of the evacuees. And yes, as of about June this year, we will have made some changes to that.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? I have only one. I know for a fact that a request for information was put in to BC Wildfire with respect to the White Rock Lake fire. The White Rock Lake fire consumed something in excess of 85,000 hectares. It destroyed communities in Monty Lake, Paxton Valley, and down in the Vernon area. The question that was put to BC Wildfire was, will there be an in-depth investigation with respect to how that fire, the White Rock Lake fire, was managed or in some people's view, mismanaged? And the answer came back that the White Rock Lake fire would be subjected only to our post-fire review, which has been concluded, and no further investigations are contemplated. My question for you is, if a fire can destroy 3 communities at 85,000 hectares, just what kind of a fire would it take to warrant a full-blown investigation?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So when you speak of investigation, you're not speaking to the fire origin and cause, which, as we shared with you, was naturally caused by lightning on the 13th of July. We can't further investigate that. We do have that report. It is, called in our FOC investigators to take a look, and it was caused by wildfire. Now it seems what you're by lightning, sorry. It seems what you're asking for is a holistic review of the fire itself and how it was managed over time. Is that correct?
That's correct. There was not a question as to the cause of the fire. The cause of the fire, once it started, is very much irrelevant in most people's opinion, and how the fire is dealt with is the critical question. And the question was asked, will there be a full investigation into how that fire was handled? And the answer was, it has been subjected to our regular post-fire review and nothing further is contemplated. And I'm wondering what it would take, what kind of a fire it would take to warrant a full investigation into the handling or mishandling, as the case may be, of the response.
I guess I'll chime in. So I guess it's your definition of full investigation, and it's a very valid question. I think Caitlin tried to address it earlier on. I mean, wildfires are natural occurring, in some cases, unfortunate cases, catastrophic events. And we constantly and regularly real-time review our decisions that we make in tactics and operations. We don't have the luxury of pausing and doing reviews during the fire, and to do it afterwards would take resources away from the prevention and mitigation and preparedness work that we do. So I believe the answer that you're provided, and I apologize to Director Gillis on, because I'm not aware of the exact wording, but it sounds like the wording that you got is very legitimate to how we would handle a situation like that post-fire. We do our review during the time and after, and it is more the learning during the operations that we capture and adjust our tactics. But currently there is no threshold or principles, as you've asked, that would automatically kick into I guess I would describe as a higher level of review, because I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, well, thank you for that answer. And I want to, on behalf of the board, thank you for putting yourselves in the firing line this afternoon. I concur with Director Stamer that a number of questions that were asked have not been answered, but we'll take those to a different level, I expect. And thanks again for being here this afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
That brings us to our building infraction matters, but I'm thinking it's 3 o'clock and we normally break at about 3 o'clock. Perhaps we could break until 3:15 and resume at that time. So we're back in session, and I don't think there are any further presenters. I don't expect another hour. That takes us, we are now at 7.2, building infraction expired permit with respect to 2019 Highway 5 west of Vavenby. This is an opportunity for owners to make representation to the board. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to this matter?
There is not.
There is not. And building infraction expired building permit 6384 Frederick Road in Frederick. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to that matter, Ms. Campbell?
There is not.
Thank you. And the third one is a building infraction, another expired permit on 6372 Frederick Road. Anyone here, Ms. Campbell, with respect to that matter?
There is not.
Thank you. And so that takes us to 8, unfinished business. The building infraction with respect to 2019 Highway 5 west of Vavenby. There is a board report and a recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Is anyone opposed? No one's opposed. It's carried. 8.2, 2019 Highway 5 Frederick. There is a recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? There seems to be none. All in favor? Anyone opposed? It's carried. And the building infraction with respect to 6372 Frederick Road, there is a report and a recommendation. Is that the one? Is that not the third one? Yeah. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay, that brings us to bylaws 9.1, the zoning amendment bylaw for 3973 Highway 97 at Monty Lake. There is a recommendation. Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? There's no discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Bylaw amendment 2758, the ALR residential flexibility changes. There are 2 recommendations. Move number 1. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Watson?
Yes, I have some questions from a constituent.
Oh, no.
Will there be the requirement to remove the structure when the land is no longer being farmed and no longer assessed as farmland by BC assessment? This would be hard to do for carriage houses and small stick-built houses. This requirement to have farm status and the chance that may be lost has the likelihood of creating inequity within zoning, where one lot within the ALR has 2 homes and the one that isn't allowed when neither one has current farm status. Also, what happens to properties where the covenant has been registered regarding the removal of the second home that fits within the current ALR size regulations when the farm status is lost? Can those covenants be discharged if the farm has current farm status?
Ms. Sadelkova.
So this has come up, and we have answered this before. And in terms of this, the requirement to have farm status has been in the bylaws since 1972, even before the ALC was created, and we have never gone back and required anybody to remove a stick-built home. The issue is that they've proved it's farmable. Sometimes farm assessment class 9 is lost when a property transfers and a new owner has to go through the paperwork, or if illness or something befalls an owner, a farmer, who then suddenly can't farm and make the necessary submissions to BC assessment. So no, in answer, no, they wouldn't have to remove it, but at least they've proved it's farmable. The whole question, because that was whether class 9 is required, was the most, I think, contentious, and it's the key question. Staff made our points on the bottom of page 3 after the green bullet, the logic for it. In terms of the covenants, so there's two kinds of covenants. One was for farm help and the other one was for assisted living. If they are in the ALR or not, if they had the proper permit in place, that unit can stay in place, even if it's a manufactured home or stick built, the one extra unit, and the covenants can then be discharged. And we will process those when and if this is passed and that comes to be through a normal process. Those do not have to go to the board of directors. Those are just simply administrative. So I hope has that answered?
I certainly hope so.
Okay.
Anything further, Director Watson?
No.
Okay, Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is interesting because right now I'm in sort of negotiations with the province on the ALR stuff because of the emergency and the ability to subdivide ALR land in an expedited manner during emergencies. MOTI has to sign off on it first, which they have done. My thoughts were the people that don't have land or a home to build on, thought it'd be fairly simple to donate 4 hectares, which is the minimum we can subdivide on our little piece of property, our farm, so Kim and Lauren would have a place to live. Went through MOTI, got on the phone with the ALC, Ron Wallace, for our area, and he said he can expedite it in 16 days once it comes from the TNRD. Got very confident that we could do this. And then I got on the phone with the province. Jones, her name, I can't even remember what part of it, I think municipal affairs. Anyways, conference call with 3 of us, and she said the fastest they can do this is in a year. And in these extraordinary circumstances, I would like, I will send something to staff, but I would like to get something for UBCM together during emergencies where there's some flexibility. The flexibility word is the key, because I think there needs to be flexibility among our ALR lands, because during emergencies, there are, as I talked to Jamie, at least 4 places that have no place to live because the land is gone. And the only land available is really ALR land. That's their only option if they want to live. And these people have moved here because this is where they want to live out their lives. So I think this is really a defining moment. And it seems the status quo was the province's way to go. And we are not in a status quo moment. So for me, this is very important. And when Minister Farnsworth said he was going to do something about this, and then he went and talked to Kim and Lauren, and I haven't heard anything back. I've sent off an email to Minister Popham. I haven't heard anything back. And I would like to at least have staff look into flexibility on ALR land during emergencies, because it's not if we have an emergency in the interior where this ALR land is, it's the magnitude of the emergency of the wildfire and the flooding. We're going to have them every year. It's just going to be the magnitude that will be the difference. This was a really bad year, but it raises question. And there's a lot of ALR land that us farmers would be willing to sort of donate to people that need a place to call home. And they're dealing with mental health issues. They're dealing with timeframes that they don't have any answers to. And there's a lot of shit going on out in our area and stuff. Look at what's happened to Lytton. And we're not getting answers. And so we really need to think outside the box on a lot of that stuff and have some outside the box answers. And I'm real frustrated, as you can imagine, because I'm not getting them. And so I'm just asking staff to maybe look at, bylaw 2400 and see if we can maybe explore a resolution for UBCM.
I'll remind you, Director Rice, that we are in fact in a public meeting and there's a level of decorum that's expected of you. Director Watson, your microphone is still on. And Ms. Zordell, did you wish
Okay.
to speak to that?
Just very briefly, Director Rice has raised a large issue. This is a very small piece, and subdivision in the ALR is a complete other creature that really is controlled by the province. And so that, I think, if you'd like us, that needs to be separate from this process, because this is a simple amendment of our zoning bylaw to meet some enabling legislation that the province has put in on a much smaller scale.
I
It-
apologize.
It is critical, but this is critical, as is yours, but they're two separate things.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion with respect to recommendation number 1? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. There's a second recommendation. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion with respect to recommendation number 2? None, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Capital Reserve Expenditure Bylaw Alternative Waste Collection System for Area J. There are 3 recommendations.
Move recommendation number 1.
Director Quinn, pardon?
There we go. I think we have to delegate who's going to be the chair and the other directors for that previous motion.
The one about the electoral.
Bylaw 2758. Part 2.
2758.
Do we have to delegate the?
1758. That was the second recommendation.
Yes,
It was moved, seconded, and
Yes.
voted upon.
yes, but do we not have to delegate those people? Am I on the same recommendation we're talking about?
Okay, we need to select one electoral or,
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Thank you.
okay. Ms. Campbell, how are we going to proceed with that?
Ms. Sadokova, what have you done in the past in terms of, do you have like a particular director in mind that you would like? There's one electoral area director.
Okay, I know better than to pick a director, whether it's electoral area or a municipal director. When it's a delegated, rezoning application, we're happy to nominate someone because we know who to nominate. But in a case like this, if I may, I would suggest that you pick and that you call for volunteers.
Where is this?
Would you be interested in that, Director
Where's the-
Rothenberger?
Where's the piece of property?
Huh? That's is not a response. Yeah, is that an affirmative? Thank you. And one municipal director? He's not here to, is that because he's not here to defend himself?
No, because he took interest in the 701 and he learned a lot from that experience.
I just appointed Director O'Reilly. Thanks, Director Christian. And thank you, Director Quinn, for bringing that to my attention.
Okay, I still don't. Where we're going, where is it supposed to be?
Okay. I think recommendation number 1 was moved and seconded before I was brought
Yes.
back to the earlier matter. And so is there any discussion with respect to that recommendation? I'm seeing none. All in favor? Is anyone opposed? Thank you. That's carried.
Number 2, move.
Any discussion? There's no discussion. That's all in favor? That's carried. We're
And
waiting,
move
Director
number
Elliott.
3. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on recommendation number 3? Seeing none, all in favor? Is anyone opposed? No one's opposed. That's carried. Development applications. There's a TUP for Stony Flats Road in Pritchard and a recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Takes us to reports. The CAO has a verbal report for us.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. I just have a brief update, if I may. Firstly, I just wanted to share that we had a very successful all managers meeting recently, just a few weeks ago, that focused on policy change, gathering feedback, and providing training on our new conflict of interest and code of conduct policy. Our entire management team will be signing off on these two important policies on a yearly basis and are in the process of doing that for 2022 as we speak. In addition to that, I'm pleased to share that our senior management team have also recently completed an online ethics course as part of the BDO forensic audit suggestions. I think it's important that both the senior management team and all of our managers and supervisors set the tone for what's expected in the organization. Secondly, I'm pleased to announce that the TNRD's grant application to the Northern Development Initiative Trust 2022 Local Government Internship Program has been approved. Casey Stein is the successful candidate for the internship, and his first day will be May 9th with the TNRD. I look forward to introducing him to the board on May 19th. Casey's from Texas and has been attending UBC Kelowna for the last number of years, majoring in economics and political science. So over the next year, Casey will be having the opportunity to work within all of our departments and showcase his skills with a number of projects and initiatives. So we're happy to welcome Casey in the very near future. And then lastly, our emergency operations team, as you may have heard already in the media, finally had an opportunity to have a debrief session from our extreme 2021 wildfire experience. The session went very well. We highlighted some of the great things we accomplished, but at the same time, discussed opportunities and gaps that need to be addressed in the future emergencies. This session was represented by all of our staff that worked in the EOC, along with our partners at BC Wildfire, EMBC, Ministry of Transportation, Red Cross, and a number of other organizations. The session was very well received and it was a great learning experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Hildebrand. Ms. Campbell, at this point, I think you wanted to address the question of our anti-vax or our vaccination requirement.
Correct. Thank you, Chair Gillis. So the board passed a resolution back in February at the February 3rd meeting, mandating that all in-person attendance of board members would require that those board members be fully vaccinated and allowing for electronic participation for those who are not. And so given that there are little to no provincial health restrictions remaining in BC, including mandatory vaccine mandates, in discussions with our legal counsel, we felt that it may be questionable to continue to have the board enforce this mandatory vaccine requirement. And so the advice that we received was that in order to do away with this, the board would need to rescind that resolution. So staff are recommending, if a board member would like to make that motion, that the mandatory vaccination for board members attending meetings in person be rescinded.
So moved.
So it's moved and seconded that we rescind the vaccination requirement. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Is anyone opposed? No one's opposed. That's carried. Thank you very much, Ms. Campbell. That takes us to small water system sustainability. I was at a utilities meeting, which leads me to believe that small water system sustainability is an oxymoron within itself. It doesn't seem to be sustainability, but in any case, there's a report from our general manager and a recommendation. And I think, if I remember correctly, I was told I have to treat that as, no, sorry. That was something else I was looking at. It is just one recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Yeah, there seems to be discussion. Good. I was hoping there would be. Director Singh.
Yeah, just on the advocacy effort, Chair Gillis, Director Allen and I were the committee talking yesterday about actually trying to get a meeting at UBCM with the minister and maybe getting a staff-to-staff meeting as well. So UBCM resolutions are just one instrument of advocacy, and they often take quite a while to kind of wind their way through the system. They're good supplements, well supplemented by actually these meetings we have with ministers. And so could we add that to the motion?
Ms. Campbell.
Thank you, Chair Gillis, through to Director Singh. So we have a process and a policy on requesting meetings with ministers at the UBCM convention. And so we will be sending out information on that shortly, and then board members can submit the meetings that they would like to have with which minister and the topic. And then that comes to the board as one report to vote on. So I would just suggest that perhaps that staff will take this back and then reach out to directors with that email and have it put forward that way, if that works.
Well, I mean, some policies need to have some exceptions, and I think this might be a good exception to that. If we do that now, at least we have that on the books for a request. So I'm fine with the process, but it requires us to kind of remember to kind of, so I think we're kind of fresh in our mind now. We should probably ask for that minister meeting and get on a list that staff's going to get with the reports. We've got to vote on it at that time. So I would prefer to do it that way.
Thank you, Director Rothenberger.
We certainly do need to look at this issue and look for alternative funding methods, but this motion really causes me concern. What it says, the way I understand it, and I think I'm pretty clear on this, is hypothetically, if I am outside a community water system service area, paying for my own water supply, either through a well or an intake in a lake or a river, say, which is almost certainly costing me more than it would if I was attached to the community water system. Under this scenario, I believe it suggests that the funding for community water systems should expand outside the user area. So I would end up paying not only for what I'm already paying for to provide my own water supply, plus somebody else's water supply. And that creates a problem. I as an individual, and I'm speaking probably, I think for most people, that I don't want to be paying for what somebody else is getting, but I'm not getting. Why should I be subsidizing that? So it's a user pay system currently, and I think it's a fair system. Those who get the benefit pay for it. This is suggesting that you don't get the benefit, but you're going to pay for it anyway. That's my problem with it.
I take it you're speaking against the recommendation.
I do have a
I've
problem
got you,
with the
Director Rice. Director Elliott.
I had not looked at this in that light, and so I'm not going to make a comment at this point.
Thank you, Director Rice.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, when I brought this forward to the board to address this, my thoughts were more along the lines of, therefore, the province be able to look at options to enable them to find a new funding formula directly to the regional districts, not just the Thompson-Nicola, because I'm sure there's other regional districts that have this same issue. But I'm sort of with Director Rothenberger here, I would prefer that the province currently they don't have any funding avenues for communities under 500, but they do have for above 500. I would just like them to find a funding avenue for communities less than 500, like all 11 of our water systems are. So that was sort of what my therefore line would have been. Therefore, they look for new funding opportunities for communities under 500, or however you want to word it. But that's what my original thinking was when I brought this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was discussed yesterday at the Utilities Committee meeting. And I have similar concerns to Director Rothenberger. My concern was more along the lines of, if we do this and tax, say, all of area B for Blue River Water, where does that leave people like Avola? And we do have a policy that's saying that we don't take any more on. So it's sort of, I don't know how to address it. Those water systems, I don't challenge the math on the numbers that need to run it, but I'm not sure that this is the best to go. And with all due respect, I simply cannot support this at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Quinn. Director Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Gillis. I mean, I think it might be beneficial if Mr. Hildebrand talked a bit about, because I know that there was discussion yesterday at the Utilities Committee about why this particular path has been taken in terms of a recommendation. And I would just say that Director Rothenberg is completely right. But I mean, we're subsidizing some of these small systems now in terms of just the way the staff complements kind of worked out. If a small system of 17 people, Maple Mission, for example, has a issue and a crew has to go out there, the sort of staff has done subsidized back and forth. So, there is a little bit of that already because of the size of these systems. But I just wanted to maybe ask Mr. Hildebrand if he could talk a bit about what we talked about yesterday at the meeting, because he did mention that the broad ask hadn't really had any traction, and maybe the more specific ask, but let him to talk about that.
Yeah, I can speak to that. We're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place on this situation. And I would also agree with Director Rothenberger. We're just trying to find a path forward to find some solution because the broad question or the broad ask that we've kind of done with staff in the past is that the legislation is not allowing us to do anything different, which then now puts us in a position where we could be charging a lot of money for small systems that have less than 20 users on it, which we may not be able to manage or sustain going forward. So it's a difficult situation, and we're open to feedback from the board on how we'd like to change that.
Thanks very much, Mr. Hildebrand. I have Director Quinn again, Director Laird, and Director Smith. Oh, and Director Rain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on a note, perhaps staff can answer this. I don't think the board actually subsidizes the water system. I think they're self-supporting. So the notion that the board as a whole is supporting water systems, I don't think is correct. I stand to be corrected on that because we pay our way. The problem is not enough of us to pay what the province demands. And I'm the same as the rest of it. How do you deal with that dilemma? And I just don't think that spreading out over a whole electoral area is going to work. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question that might help here a bit, Ms. Campbell or Mr. Hildebrand, I'm not sure who, but as we know, a substantial amount of our revenue comes, TNRD revenue comes from municipalities, and particularly the city of Kamloops. They remind us of that every so often. And I'm just wondering if this recommendation, which I realize is just going to UBCM, but suppose it did result in the LGA being amended to allow us to take funds from a broader tax base and apply them to community water systems. When we say a broader tax base, I assume that would include all the municipalities in our regional district too, would it not?
I'm going to let Mr. Vieira address that.
Well, I think I'll speak generally into what I understand the intent of this is. The intent of this recommendation is just to, if the legislation is amended, it would allow the board to make whatever decision they would like around funding it. So this isn't a recommendation to this board that it be funded or even what that would look like or who would pay into it. That can't come to this board yet because the legislation doesn't allow it. So the challenge with these systems, if something dramatic happened and repairs need to be done and there's absolutely no money to fund that system, the liability for that system rests on the TNRD as a whole, on this board as a whole, because they are the owners of the system. The only money to fix that system is currently restricted in that service area. So right now, if something disastrous happens and we need $100,000 to keep us from, to protect the organization, or $10,000, whatever it is, using those as examples, that can't be done yet. If this is if this legislation is amended, the board would have the power to make that decision. Not at all suggesting now that the decision be made on whether or not that be done.
Thanks ever so much for clarifying that for me, Mr. Vieira. Director Laird.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In my area, we have an independent water district that has no ability for either, not in the TNRD, they're an independent one, and I'm sure there's others within the regional district. But I'm able to use my gas tax money, or whatever they call it now, the community building fund, to help them with their problems they're having with no funding. So I think area directors, if they look at the opportunity, they can assist individual districts within their area with the gas tax funding.
Thank you. Director Smith.
Thank you. I think, Mr. Chair, my point has been made already by staff that we're just asking for an amendment to the Local Government Act to allow regional districts to have a mechanism to be able to address that issue. It's not that we're asking for them to allow us to actually do it, just to give us that mechanism, since they're the ones that are providing the standards, but they're not providing us the mechanism to help provide the service. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Rain.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. I do support Director Rothenberger's concerns. However, I was following up on Director Singh's comment. Can he use his influence at UBCM to maybe get this as a panel discussion set up so that it opens up some discussion among other municipalities, regional districts at UBCM? I mean, obviously a resolution might be premature at this point, but a discussion would be at a panel level would be a good idea, I think.
Thank you, Director Watson. I've got you, Director Rothenberger.
Thank you. Mr. Vieira, you used that dirty word, a liability, which I think is the dirtiest word we use here. I wonder at what point are we going to decide that the liability of a small water system is too dangerous for us to face, and we can't be the authority having jurisdiction over it, and we shut them down. That's what we did with fire departments. We have to decide whether we actually are serving our communities or we are just taking care of the rich, and to heck with the poor.
Director Rothenberger.
Thanks, Chair. Well, just in response to Mr. Vieira's comment about it's just to open up an avenue to take care of liability issues and extreme circumstances, or whatever the wording was. Well, in fact, this motion doesn't quite say that. It says it wants to allow regional districts to utilize revenue from a broader tax base to help address the health and safety issues associated with the funding gap on very small water systems. It clearly opens the door to the possibility of expanding beyond existing service areas for the ongoing funding, capital, and operating of these systems. And that simply is not fair.
Thank you, Director Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really don't know why we can't just take that whole paragraph right out of there. Because the intent of the motion, or the intent of the recommendation to go to UBCM, is so that there's some help for small water systems. And so we don't need a broader base. We do, some of us already put our money from the tax gas revenue into these water systems, but to run them is what we're asking the province help us with, not the capital, to help us run the system for small water systems where there's 14 to 25 people. So if that is the issue with Director Rothenberger and a couple of them, let's just take it right out and still send a recommendation to UBCM for the resolution.
Thank you, Director Stamer.
Chair. Thanks to Director Rothenberger for starting this discussion because I think we should, unless we're up against a timeline with the UBCM submission on this, is it?
Microphone, please.
Sorry, bears to light, sorry for that. It bears to light that, you know, we're in a situation here where a scenario could be where you have to prove water. You only proof of water in that development might be a well for 3 or 4 or 5 people or whatever it is. And then for whatever reason, they do not continue to use that. The regional district comes along and assumes the responsibility. And now we're expecting the rest of the taxpayers base to supplement that system when maybe it shouldn't have been built in the first place. And I think we've got a lot of other unanswered questions on this. Is there any reason that we can't defer this to the next meeting so that we can look through this again? Because Director Rothenberger and other directors have brought up some really good points on it. And I don't think it's fair for the whole regional district to have to start subsidizing all these small little water systems. And I appreciate what Mr. Vieira has said, but in reality, I think we need more work on this.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Did I see your hand up?
Thank you, Chair. Just through to Director Stamer. So this was, I believe, brought forward at a committee meeting. And so we want to ensure that this resolution actually captures what the board, what that committee wanted and what the board wanted. So if that's not what this I mean, staff kind of took a crack at drafting something based on what they thought the understanding was. And so it sounds like that's not the case. And so the deadline for UBCM resolutions to be submitted is June 30th. So there's nothing preventing us from perhaps deferring this to another meeting where staff can take the input that we've received today and draft something that meets what the board is looking for a little bit further, including the addition of requesting a meeting with the minister as Director Singh suggested.
Thank you. And I completely agree with Director Rothenberger. I think this is the wrong way to go, and it opens the door. It doesn't create any unfairness in and of itself, but it opens the door to unfairness. And if we had taken it to a vote, I would vote against it. I'm just wondering if Director Rice would. I saw his hand up a moment ago. I wonder if he's interested in making an amendment to the effect that that UBCM request the province of British Columbia to amend the local to establish a fund for the support of small water systems throughout the province, because obviously they're the way things are, they're unsustainable.
Thank you, Chair. That's exactly what I'd like to do. And thank you for Director Elliott for saying that. I think we're making this a little bit too complicated. My thoughts are you need to get this there. There could be an emergency tomorrow, for crying out loud. So you can delay it and defer it and do all that kind of stuff. But I think we need to get it UBCM. And there, I love the idea of a panel discussion. I love the idea of a minister's meeting. But simply on the therefore line, I don't understand why we can't just ask the province to explore avenues to fund small water systems under 500 for regional districts. Make it as simple as that. Yes, I am.
Director Rothenberger, I'm sorry.
So this amendment basically scraps everything that's there and inserts something totally new. I don't know if that's in order or not, but I take it that so that would not be referred back to staff or the committee for further contemplation, bringing it back to the next meeting. Just wondering about the process and what this amendment really does.
I think you're right. I think that it would.
Chair, is there any reason why we can't spend a month to rehash this? Because again, I still think there's also the provincial government involved as well, because we've all got systems within the regional district and other districts where we're going to be having the same situation. And if we're going to be pooling funds specifically for that, I agree with Director Rice, then the provincial government should be coming to the table as well. And, you know, we should be able to have that opportunity to do that and have a finely worded resolution to the UBCM so they understand exactly what we're talking about.
So you're moving that we defer it for.
I'm making a motion, we defer it for a month. We can get the committee to rehash it and then we can bring it back and have a further
the-
discussion. We're already at 4 o'clock. I'm not really that
Second.
comfortable with that.
Is there a May the 19th meeting, Ms. Campbell? I'm not sure when
The committee does not meet again until the
Well, then we just-
fall- the fall, I
we-
believe. But I think we've gotten some helpful input, and if directors would like to reach out to staff, this is typically what the process would be for drafting a UBCM resolution. We would be meeting with directors and getting their input and working with them, following UBCM's guidelines on how to draft a resolution. So I think what we've heard is helpful here, and we still welcome additional input and suggestions from directors so that we can bring back a new resolution for the board to discuss at the May meeting.
So moved.
that sounds good. Thank you. Director Quinn.
Just an aside, I did mention yesterday at the Utilities Committee meeting, perhaps as a way of thinking outside the box. We saw another presentation today that there's money for fire mitigation. You got fire, you got water to put it out. Maybe we can blend the two. There may be a way through that system to gain some extra funding. I don't know if it's way out to lunch, but.
Thank you. Do we have to vote on that, Ms. Campbell, or that's just a deferral, isn't it?
Should vote on, it. I believe it was moved and seconded to defer it.
Pardon?
I believe it was moved and seconded. I'm tired.
Okay, so all in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Huh. Here's another controversial one. The Canada Community Building Fund, electoral area O, Lower North Thompson. There is a recommendation.
I would like to move that recommendation.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Uh, 1114, referral for a new outdoor patio or an existing lounge at the Monty Creek Winery. There's a recommendation. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I have a note here that Ms. Dilkup is prepared to speak to this if we need her to, but I see no discussion, so all in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. And wind power project crown referrals, there's a recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Is anyone opposed? That's carried. That takes us to 1116, Fire Department Training Officer and Fire Smart Coordinator. There is a recommendation. Is there any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Anyone opposed? I see no one opposed. That's carried. That's just one recommendation, right, Ms. Campbell? I see it's that and that. Yep. Funding allocation electoral area. Oh, here comes Director Kershaw again.
Thank you.
There is a recommendation.
I would like to move recommendation number 1.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? None. All in favor? Opposed, if any?
Move recommendation number 2.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried.
Thank you.
TNRD Civic Building Chiller Update Contract Award. There's a recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Elliott. Yeah.
Would you please tell me what a chiller is? A what?
A reefer. We got. Oh, was it? Director Quinn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is that the unit that sits out here that we're talking about? On the second floor down in this corner?
Mr. Vieira?
Is it the
There I can speak to now. It's referring to our air conditioning unit. So it's a chiller for that. Last year during our 75 days of EOC, it was 40 degrees in here for probably 2 or 3 of those months. So
So
it's
the
it's just an equipment upgrade. It's in the budget.
the question is it going to be a little quieter?
I would assume so, but
Thank you.
I will check into that.
Is there any further discussion? I'm seeing none. All in favor? Is anyone opposed? That's carried. Takes us to committees. Audit Committee Director Rain.
That was a meeting yesterday, and we have recommended that the auditors present the regional district and the hospital board budgets at our next meeting. And in addition, there will be an audit, an additional audit report coming to us.
Thank you. Economic Development Director.
Mr.
Roden.
Chair, point of order. 1119, building permit activity report. Need a motion for that? I'll make that motion.
Second.
Sorry, we weren't quite at committees, were we? All right. Economic Development Director Roden.
No meeting, no report. Next meeting I have on the calendar is September 7th.
Thank you. Electoral Area Directors, Director Kershaw.
No meeting, no report.
Emergency Management and Protective Services, Director Watson.
No meeting, no report.
Policy Review Committee Director, I don't know, who do we go? We'll go to Director Roden, I guess.
Why not? Next, no meeting, no report. Next one is on May 18th, and in her absence, I know, but I would like to acknowledge Director Sinclair, former Director Sinclair, who was the chair of the policy committee and did an excellent job through a very difficult time, and she will be missed.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Is anyone opposed? That's carried. Regional Solid Waste Management Committee Director Schaefer.
Meeting this morning and the minutes will be forthcoming.
Thank you. Thompson-Nicola Invasive Plants Director Kershaw.
Approve the minutes of the March 9th, 2022 minutes. Need a seconder.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried. Thompson-Nicola Hospital District Director Christian.
No meeting, no report.
Utilities Systems Director Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a meeting yesterday, talked about small water systems. We had an update on the capital of the amount of capital being spent right now to fix some of them, and our minutes will be forthcoming at the next meeting.
Thank you. Thompson Headwaters Director Quinn.
No meeting, no report. Next meeting, May 11th.
Wells Gray Country Services Director Schaefer.
No meeting, next meeting, May.
Thank you. Joint Services Director Schaefer.
We had a meeting on April the 11th, and the minutes will be forthcoming. Next meeting is July the 11th, 2022. But one really good thing that came out of there, we had requested that the Ministry of Transportation fix up the crosswalk at Wells Gray and Highway 5. And they are going to be updating it this summer with flashing lights and pedestrian activated signal, which is great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll go back to Director Christian. Director Christian. It's been brought to my attention that there were minutes from the Thompson Regional Hospital District from March 24th.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, those are draft minutes, so those would be approved by the Thompson Regional Hospital District at its next meeting, which will be June the 16th.
Thank you. Fraser Basin Council Director Rice. We're into external committees now. Fraser Basin, Director Rice.
Yeah, no meeting, no report, but I would like to note, I believe we're still in search of a Thompson Region Youth Director, which was between the ages of 16 and 30, and of course have a sort of a green Fraser Basin mindset, skill set kind of thing. Thank you.
Well, I guess you've eliminated some of us with your Municipal Finance Authority, Director Brown, I guess, in the absence of Director O'Reilly.
I know Director O'Reilly had a meeting recently. He will report on this at the next meeting.
Thank you. Municipal Insurance Director Duty.
Well, you would have no idea how I was looking forward to giving you a lengthy, informative, comprehensive, scintillating report. But unfortunately, COVID got to me and I was unable to attend the conference. So no meeting, no report.
We're devastated, Director Duty. Shuswap Watershed Council, Director Crow.
No meeting, no report.
Kamloops Airport, Director Roden.
No meeting, no report.
Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Director Singh. He's just departed. Community Energy Association, Director Blackwell. Thank you. That takes us to correspondence action requested. There's a letter from Tricia Thorpe regarding weekly updates to the Lytton area area. Ms. Campbell.
Mr. Vieira.
Thanks, Chair. I just, from a staff perspective, an update. We did have following this letter, we did have a meeting with the residents of Area I last week, where we addressed a number of the questions in this letter. We also committed to participate as TNRD in the join with the community of Lytton's monthly community update meetings. So we will speak from a TNRD's perspective on those meetings on an ongoing basis and be available to address questions at those meetings.
Thank you. There's a letter of support request for a funding application regarding standalone broadband for rural environments. That's correspondent dated March 24th.
Move a letter of support.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I see none. All in favor? That's carried. There's a letter for information only regarding the temporary suspension of advisory planning commission meetings. Can we have a motion to receive it for information? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Oh, just a minute, Director Watson.
Can we give these concerned citizens an answer? This isn't for information. Oh, it is for information only. I thought she was looking for an answer.
Thank you. Just a minute, I've got.
If I may, she is looking for a reply. So, staff can work together on a reply. And it's interesting to get this. I am aware of this letter, but even there's only been one director to reappoint, and even with the reappointments that were necessary last year, 1/3 of the 21 seats were vacant to begin with. So she raises the idea of advertising. I did go to this APC and I will reach out again because I think that we may need to do that. So staff will draft a letter for the chair's signature and we'll circulate it to the electoral area directors for that APC.
Thanks very much. Director Walsh.
Yeah, I just want to, what is the process to answer that letter? Like they're asking us to reconsider that decision, basically to reverse that decision. So if, you know, as a director that I'm sympathetic with that idea and I believe it's a very valuable service, you know, local knowledge is very valuable. How would we, where would we go from that? Because that's what the letter is asking basically, is to reconsider, in a sense, reverse the decision, or suspend it.
Mr. Chairman, on a point of order, if we're going to discuss this, we should remove it from information for action requested, and I would so move.
Okay,
I haven't heard a seconder.
I'll second it.
We're having a discussion on something with information, and I think. procedure,
And
we
all
should
in
call it
favor?
out.
Okay, so it's now in action requested. And Ms. Adilkova, did you have more to say on the topic?
So with all due respect, Director Welsh, I think we've been working on reports and gathering input on problems with our advisory planning commissions for 3 or 4 years with no luck. So it wasn't to staff believe that there's definitely a place for APCs, but it wasn't working. We weren't getting quorum. Applicants were upset. There's folks who couldn't Zoom in and they couldn't travel. Even after COVID, if COVID's calmed down, a lot of folks don't have driver's license, they're elderly. So what I'd like to do, what the motion was, I'm going to try to give you the Coles notes of 4 years, just suspend them temporarily. We did that still during COVID and bring them back in the new year with a new bylaw and a new regime. I would very much like if some of the people that were appointed last time, these are board appointments, staff don't get involved in who's appointed. But I would like very much if some of them that are more able-bodied and able to participate by Zoom and able to drive and are committed to showing up would let their name stand again. So it is a temporary suspension at this point. It's probably for about another 8 months.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? None, so it's now in action requested, and I take it that the action is going to be that staff respond to Ms. Hardy's concerns. So would somebody want to make a motion to that staff be directed to respond?
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Anyone opposed? I'm sorry, Director Rain.
Yeah, just in follow-up to Director Walsh's comments, I do think it is important that we explain what is just being told to us, that it will get reorganized and restructured. I think maybe that's missing in the communications.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Takes us to new business from members. Any new business? Director Stamer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering if there's an appetite after what we saw from the BC Wildfire Service today to see if we can still either have a letter to the minister and or Mr. Meyer from the BC Wildfire Service on some of the unanswered questions that we submitted to them a week and a half ago, particularly on the actions on some of the fires. They didn't really want to get into the details on their reviews and those kinds of things. And then also on the payment for services, I think we all believe that's pretty important that we try to get to the bottom of some of that. If we expect our residents and our business owners to be able to be there for us this fire season, we should be able to try to find a better way of getting them paid in a timely fashion and not just be constantly asked, well, can you give us a name so that we can get to it? I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for us to have a motion I'll make that motion if we can send a fairly strongly worded letter to both the minister and the BC Wildfire Service for additional information. And also wondering if it's possible to get Mr. Shrepnick at our next meeting, because as Director Singh alluded to, I think we'd probably feel a whole lot better with maybe an update from him on where we stand at the TNRD level of preparedness. And maybe that's an opportunity for directors to be able to ask some pointed questions to him so that we can feel confident in our abilities to do what we can in this fire season.
Well, I'm a little vague on where you're going with that, Director Stamer. Were you making a motion that we request a meeting with the minister?
Well, I make a motion, we request a meeting with the minister, and if he's not able, then I would like to be able to ask Mr. Meyer point blank on some of these questions, because it's pretty obvious that the questions that we asked were pretty straightforward, and Ms. Baskerville did her very best to answer them, but I don't think that she, answered them to my satisfaction, and I'm not sure about the rest of the board.
So you're asking that, are you moving that?
Yeah, I'm moving that we send a letter to the minister asking for either himself or the head of the BC Wildfire Service to be able to supplement those questions that we asked of them
Thank you.
with some
Okay, is there a
further
seconder?
clarification.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Mr. Hildebrand?
Thank you, Chair Gillis. We proactively did discuss with BC Wildfire prior to this presentation today that a minister meeting could be set up. So this is something that we could simply do. If that's what you wish. Another letter, we certainly, I guess we could do that, but just setting up that minister meeting might be more effective. And maybe perhaps the head of wildfire could also accompany him.
Does that satisfy your concerns?
It does, Mr. Chair, but I mean, we're back into the fire season and we had these initial discussions in October, November. I would hope that that would be in the next 30 days, not in the next 30 months.
Could that be included in the letter, Mr. Hildebrand?
Well, certainly, we'll just make the phone call and get the meeting set up within the next 30 days, including the head of BC Wildfire.
Okay, in that case, Director Stamer, do you
I'll
want to?
withdraw my
Thank
motion.
you. And that's okay with your seconder? Okay, Director Quinn?
If we're going to send staff and people down to a meeting with the minister, I'm not so sure it'd be successful in Zoom. It'd be much better eye to eye, and all those people need expenses.
Mr. Hildebrand?
et cetera.
This isn't a staff meeting. This would be a board, like
Yeah.
select board. This isn't staff.
So then do we need a motion now to be able to cover the expenses of those that travel down?
It could be a conference call. It could be a Zoom call. Yeah, we just need to coordinate first and find out what the details would be.
I'll withdraw the question. Thank you.
Director Stamer?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And also just to add, we didn't get an opportunity because, I mean, we've had a long meeting. We didn't get an opportunity to ask, but it was brought to my attention last week, a particular incident in Barrier where I was at the insurance office and there was 4 separate people that came in for household insurance that day. And unfortunately, they were not allowed to purchase household insurance because there was still an active fire on the map. It wasn't an actual burning fire, but it was an actual fire on the map on the system that the insurance bureau uses. And I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention that it's very important for us to be able to get ahead of these fires, because if we don't get ahead of them and put them out, we could be putting our residents at risk by not being able to, get proper fire insurance in this upcoming fire season, just because of the technicality of not being able to get those fires cleaned up and off the system. So I think we better, try to get into that a little bit more and find out exactly where our obligations are in that.
That, I take it, would be a topic for the meeting.
Yes, sir, it would. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there any further new business from members? Director Rice?
Thank you, Chair. I didn't have new business till Director Stamer just brought that up. And what we're finding now in our area is with the fires and the floods, it was pretty hard to get insurance before. I actually couldn't get insurance for our business nor for the farm. But that being said, the picture has gotten grimmer for businesses and for residents in the insurance picture, and it needs to be addressed because we got to get in front of this insurance thing, because moving forward with these disasters, we're getting less and less opportunities to be insured. And there seems to be 2 standards. If you're completely uninsured, they're going to cover you. We've been told in Lytton that sort of has changed. If you're partially underinsured, there's a different funding formula, if any at all. So I think Director Stamer brings up a good point on this insurance. It's pretty convoluted right now, and it's getting worse.
Thank you. Is there any further new business from members? I'm seeing none. That takes us to question period. I see a hand up. Step forward, please. I'd ask that you give your name, and we'll do our best to answer your questions.
Thank you. My name is Tricia Thorpe. I live in TNRD Area I, just outside of Lytton. First of all, I want to thank Vice Chair Roden for arranging a meeting for TNRD Area I Lytton residents recently and the staff. It was welcomed 9.5 months after the fire, and I'm very grateful that now those 18 to 20 people that were affected by the Lytton fire that lived in TNRD Area I will now have some kind of representation at the community meetings. What I would respectfully ask is that you please expand your toolbox and your way of thinking. I mean, it's great that we're now having the meeting, but I'd asked a lot of questions. I'd like to see some advocacy. November 4th, I wrote a letter to the board, or it was addressed at the board November 4th. And at that point, I believe that the chair said that there would be advocacy for those of us in Area I, Lytton area. Those of us that were impacted by the fire and did not have insurance, there is no recourse. It's not like a flood. There is nothing. So I'm respectfully asking that you advocate for funds for hell of high water, that you talked to CN about the 58,000 plus that they recently donated to Village of Lytton, and the 58,000 plus that they recently delivered or donated to Lytton First Nations. Area I was not included in that. I'd respectfully ask that you join your voice and make a third voice when we're talking about health services, Canada Post, RCMP, anything like that, because 3 voices are a lot louder than 1 or 2. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your questions and your request, and thank you for coming and appearing before us here today. Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
Thank you. We stand adjourned.